Good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning, and welcome to the Twin West Chamber of Commerce, Minneapolis Regional of Commerce Issues and Insights Legislative Webinar for December. I'm going to give everyone a minute or two to hop on, so if you haven't gotten coffee yet, feel free to get up and do that, and we will get going here in a minute or two. Good morning again, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning for the Minneapolis Regional Chamber Issues and Insights Legislative Webinar. We're just going to give people another minute to get settled, and then we will get rolling. All right, good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us for this December edition of the Minneapolis Regional Chamber Issues and Insights Legislative Webinar. We have a great program for you this morning. We're honored to be joined by Jeff Blodgett, who is the 2008 and 2012 Obama-Biden Minnesota campaign director. And we're going to have a great discussion previewing the Biden administration. And unfortunately, Senator Durenberger was slated to join us this morning, but he became ill this week and is unable to join us. However, I'll moderate a great discussion with Jeff, and we're going to cover a lot of topics related to the incoming administration. There's certainly not a lack of things to talk about. We'll also hear from our legislators this morning and a couple of our mayors. And first, we're going to thank our sponsors, because without their support, we wouldn't be able to do these events. So we're extremely grateful. Our series sponsor is Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures. And our sustaining sponsors are Allina Health, CenterPoint Energy, PCS Human Capital Management, Rasmussen College, Rudy Luther Toyota. And I apologize here, it looks like I've lost the presentation. Give me one sec. Here. Apologize, give me one moment. Just going to try that again one more time. Apologize on my end here. There we go. Apologize. I'm going to start over with the sponsors. Thanks for dealing with my technical glitch there. I'm using two screens, which is different than normal. Our series sponsors, Mille Lacs Corporate Ventures, and our sustaining sponsors are Allina Health, CenterPoint Energy, PCS Human Capital Management, Rasmussen College, Rudy Luther Toyota, Velocity Public Affairs. Our session sponsors are AAA Minneapolis, AT&T, CBiz MHM, Choice Bank, Comcast, Scott Build, Goff Public, Weber Johnson, And our media sponsor is Finance and Commerce. And our in-kind sponsor is Runway Analytics. We're always grateful to hear from our legislators, and the legislator/elected official question of the day is, as we approach the 2021 legislative session, what is your top priority to get done during this session? And for our mayor or two mayors, I'm not sure how many we have, feel free to offer either your perspective, maybe what your city's biggest priority is with the legislative session, or perhaps something that is a top priority for your city related to COVID relief. And I see that we have Mayor Brad Wiersum at the top of my list here. So we're going to start with him. Brad is the mayor of Minnetonka.
Thank you, John Paul. And it's very nice to be here. I will say that your technical glitch is only one that we have all experienced. So don't feel too badly about that. It just happens in this Zoom world.
Yeah,
but you know, as I thought about this question this morning, really, you know, the big issue that we all face is COVID. And as I look at the legislature, I mean, a couple of things cities really care about and Minnetonka really cares about. One, we care about local control, and that is an ongoing theme. But the next thing is anything that the legislature can do to help cities support their small businesses and help our residents. Minnetonka had two programs that we had some money that we could direct toward small business relief and rental assistance for our residents. And those issues are going to be big issues in 2021 too. So those are two areas that I would look to the legislature to help cities with, because clearly it's a very challenging time for businesses. And clearly it's a challenging time for renters, particularly as you know, some of the programs that were in effect, thinking of, well, just a number of programs that will expire at the end of the year. Cities are going to need help helping their residents. So I'll leave it at that.
Mayor, thank you. While we're with our mayors, I'll go to Jeff Washe, who's the mayor of Plymouth.
Thank you, John Paul. And I'll just kind of carry on with Mayor Wiersum's point. I've talked to a number of local restaurant owners that I'll start with the special session, you know, they're really looking for some relief. They say, they've all told me that if they don't get some relief coming up this month, they're probably not going to open their doors in 2021. So I think it's imperative that these businesses are on the brink. And if our legislature really needs to get behind it, and they've been shut down, they just can't keep weathering this. So whatever they can do to help with some of that business relief is just going to go a long ways. The next thing I talk about is, you know, the biggest thing in Plymouth right now that we're looking at is County Road 47. That's on the northern end. It's borders with Maple Grove. It's a regional transit way that goes out to Corcoran and Medina from Plymouth and Maple Grove. And that we've had an engineering study done in the last year, and to upgrade that, the population since that road was built is it's not a safe road. People walk along that to get to trails and parks, and it's not safe to walk on. So we studied that needed upgrades to that, and that's $30 million. And the county just doesn't have the money. The city doesn't have the money. So we just need help with that. So we're looking to start advocating if there's going to be some bonding this year and definitely in the following year. And when it is a bonding year, to get some help with getting that road upgraded.
Mayor Washe, thank you. Representative Cleavorn, if you're ready, we'll love to hear from you.
Thank you. Good morning. It's always great to be with you, and it's great to be with my mayor. My priorities are the same from year to year. It's meeting the needs of our community and making sure that I am the strongest advocate for our community. So as the mayor discussed, we have families who need unemployment relief. We have businesses that need financial support to just survive. And then also making sure that the critical infrastructure of our community is protected and enhanced. Of course, every legislator is going to be trying to figure out how we do this financially So part of that is also putting pressure on our federal delegation to step in and help. And no time is more critical than now. So I encourage everyone on this call this morning to reach out to our federal delegation and do all we can to make sure that that federal stimulus comes back into our state. So those are my priorities for now. And thank you for the invitation to be with you this morning.
Thank you, Representative. Representative Bonner.
Good morning, everybody. I'm State Representative Kristen Bonner from Maple Grove and Osseo. And I think, the common thread through this year is obviously going to be COVID, and COVID. Much like Ginny, I think it's really how we best serve our communities. Obviously some of those top priorities are going to be relief for small businesses, make the top of that list, as well as our workers. And making sure that we're covering bases in things like housing and education. Obviously, we need workers who can go to work because their kiddos are taken care of educationally. We need workers who are strong and stable. But in terms of businesses, I think one of the themes that we are looking at a great deal is how we be more flexible. How do we provide greater aid to those businesses? I think we all share a fear that, realistically speaking, that the longer that we are closed for some of these businesses, the restaurants, the hospitality folks, that it becomes much, much more difficult in this equation for them to be resilient and to bounce back. And, a lot of these small businesses, like in Osseo, for example, in my district, these are all, there's a lot of very small mom and pop shops, family restaurants that have been in our community for 50 years that do great work. And, the idea of losing even one of them pains me quite a bit. So I think we're going to see a lot of that working together in the legislature to provide the necessary aid in all of these areas and to give greater flexibility so that we can ensure that they survive.
Representative Bonner, thank you. I believe we also have Representative Youakim.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. Really excited for the program. I think our concerns have been through the special session and into the special session starting on Monday, trying to meet the needs of folks during this global pandemic that's really highlighted all the disparities that we have in our communities. And frankly, all the amazing services are not only our cities and counties do, but also that our businesses provide our citizens. What we need to do moving forward, of course, we're mandated to set a 2-year state budget, but more importantly, we need to be really honest about the revenue we need to meet the needs of our community members, our individuals, the businesses, families, and come to the table together and figure that out, because I think we can tackle this. We've tackled it before in Minnesota, and we need to tackle it again.
Thank you, Representative. And last, certainly not least, I believe we have Senator Swedzinski.
Thanks. Okay. Well, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Thanks for the for inviting me, John Paul. I always appreciate it. Yeah. For me, as many of you may know or may not know, I taught high school for 33 years, and I became aware of something we all did in this COVID world we live in. And imagine if with my 35 students, I only made 30 copies of an assignment and said, yeah, I only have 30 of these, so I don't know what to tell the 5 of you that aren't getting one. And that's what I feel like we're doing right now with respect to broadband. We're sending kids assignments and doing lessons, and in greater Minnesota, and you guys have heard these stories. Parents are driving their kids to Walmart parking lots and McDonald's parking lots and sitting there while the kids do their homework because they don't have access to the internet at home. And at first during COVID, I started thinking it was a greater Minnesota issue. And then all of a sudden I started hearing the stories from my own district. And there was a family in Eden Prairie that had 4 kids, and they their internet or their web access or their router or whatever the technical term is, they all couldn't be on Zoom at the same time. It couldn't handle, their household couldn't handle the number of Zoom requests. And so these 4 kids had to decide which ones were going to miss school that day. And that's not okay. And so my number one issue this session, and hopefully along with Congressman Phillips will get some broadband funding, so these kids, when they want to do their homework, they're not in a technological void of not being able to get their homework done. So that's the number one thing for me.
Great. Thank you, Senator Swedzinski. Thank you to all our legislators and our mayors. We appreciate your engagement very much. And I will give you a sneak peek next month. We're going to talk to our new legislators as well as a couple of our new Hennepin County commissioners. And your question of the day is going to be your advice to them. So be thinking of that. Now we will move on to introducing our speaker for the day. We're very grateful to have Jeff Blodgett with us. Jeff served as a senior advisor to the Biden for President campaign in Minnesota. He has worked in Minnesota national politics and public life for 34 years. In 2012, Jeff served as the state director for the Obama campaign in Minnesota, a position he also held in 2008. In 2003, Jeff started and ran for 7 years the Organizing Wellstone Action, a national center of training, capacity building, and leader development for people and organizations involved in politics and public life. He spent 13 years as a senior aide, advisor, and campaign manager to the late U.S. Senator Paul Wellstone, running all 3 of his election campaigns, including the hard-fought 2002 race that was cut short by tragedy, 12 days before the election. Jeff, thanks for being with us this morning. We got to connect yesterday. There's obviously a lot to talk about related to the incoming Biden administration, but I thought to get started, I'll give you an opportunity to frame your thoughts and get us rolling.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Thank you for the invitation to be here. And for those who tuned into this breakfast to hear the distinguished former senator from Minnesota, Dave Durenberger, I apologize. He's not able to be here. And so you're stuck with me. But so what I wanted to just do is frame up the conversation about the incoming Biden administration. And I think what's going to be interesting to see is I think it will be a mix of both ambitious activity on the one hand and moderation on the other hand. On the ambitious activity side, I think we're talking about the direct action, the direct work that the administration can do. These are executive orders and the administrative side of things. And I think that's certainly, at the top of that list is executing the COVID response and the vaccine distribution. And I think that the transition has, at least on that topic, is going fairly well. I think there's a lot of work to restock the federal government with talented people. And that's not just cabinet secretaries, but there's a lot of open positions just below cabinet secretary on down. And I think the incoming Biden administration is poised to begin to fill a lot of those positions rapidly because the cabinet secretary approval process coming through the Senate will take some time. But I think they want to populate the government quickly with experienced hands, especially in key departments, in key agencies right away. The third will be, on the direct front, will be a return to some normalcy and operating norms. That is one of the things that Biden ran on. That includes the way we look at and treat the Justice Department, deal making with Congress, handling management of intelligence, relations with our allies, how we work with the other side, working with Republican governors, for instance, which was not something that the outgoing president did very well, for instance. And then the fourth thing is just the bully pulpit, just what you can do through communicating with people and giving people a sense that we're in this together, talking to people who didn't vote for for him. Trying to lower the red and blue divide some, especially around challenging the response to COVID. So on that administrative side, I think we're going to see a lot of action fast. On the public policy front, though, I think is where we'll see a fair amount of forced moderation and pragmatism. Joe Biden is a long time center left politician who's governed from the center, and so I think those are his instincts. But we've got a Senate that is divided. We'll see what the elections in Georgia hold, but even if one of those races goes well, it will still be a divided U.S. Senate. And so I think on the policy front, there will have to be a lot of work done to get things done. There will be a lot of compromise that will have to happen. It will really matter the moderate Republicans and the moderate Democrats coming together in the Senate to cobble deals. I think at the top of the policy list will be some kind of major economic stimulus package. There's a relief bill that's being discussed in the Senate in the House right now, and hopefully that passes before there's a new administration. But there will have to be another round. And right now we're talking about relief and hearing from the mayors in particular, the acute pain that's out there. And so hopefully we'll see some relief quickly from the federal government this year even. But I think we'll see some kind of major stimulus. And we can talk more about like the form that will take. So I think watch for both a lot of activity on the direct front and kind of slow and steady, hopefully progress on the policy side next year.
Awesome. That's a great framing. Maybe let's start with kind of in the realm of things that are somewhat under President-elect Biden's control. How do you think he will handle COVID and kind of managing us out of the pandemic? And how do you think that his leadership there is going to be different than President Trump's?
Well, I think that on one hand, President Biden is sees this as a fight that we're all in. That he's gonna work really hard to get the country as a whole to come along on both doing what we need to do right now to keep people safe and stop the spread, and move super quickly on the vaccine. And there were good people in the Trump administration who were working on this. I don't think they were always listened to, and so I do think that the public health science will be front and center. And then it's all about distributing and executing the distribution of the vaccine, which I think there are some plans already in place. And so it's a matter of adding to that and working with states and localities. So I do think the one maybe difference that we'll see is just a lot more collaboration with state governments of all stripes, not just the friendly ones to the White House, which has been a problem for some governors, even our governor of Minnesota. And so, many governors have been on their own on this fight, and I think the federal government will become a stronger partner. So, the rapid development of the vaccine is really quite amazing and stunning, and the current administration deserves credit for that. And now it's time to get it out quickly and evenly around the country.
Yeah, thank you. And Victoria reminded me, feel free to ask questions in the chat bar. I'll try to monitor them as we go, but certainly we'll get to them at the end as well. Kind of next topic, Jeff, talk about, you mentioned the return of normalcy to the presidency. And regardless of people's feelings about President Trump, we've seen, an unconventional leadership style and, kind of, at least in modern times, a presidency that's kind of unlike any other. How do you think, what are the pros there of perhaps the return to normalcy?
Well, I think there'll just be less general chaos in in the communication that comes out of the White House and from this president. It will be a much more normal and official form of communicating with people. So there'll be regular press briefings again. Their press will get the kind of access that that they need to hold this administration accountable. I think there will be days when we may not hear from the president, which is probably a good thing after 4 years. So that I think, and also I think there will be President-elect Biden will pick his times when he wants to speak to the country and really try to move people and opinion in ways that make sense. But he will, I think, use those times carefully and try to get the most out of them. But then there's a lot of just operating norms that I think, if Joe Biden had a mandate of any kind, it is this sort of return to kind of a more normal way of operating out of the federal government. And so, again, like how independent agencies are treated, like the Justice Department, like the FBI, the process for dealing with intelligence. I think there was a lot of nervousness about the politicization of the intelligence, how intelligence was handled, how the president received intelligence, and what we did with that. And I think that there will be a restoration of the normal process for collecting and examining intelligence and moving things up the line that really matter. Relations with our allies. I think there will be a very different kind of foreign policy, one that goes back to respecting the international alliances that we've been part of for years and years. And that's just something that Joe Biden believes in. He's very steeped in. And I think he will look to allies and building coalitions to tackle problems, even tackle COVID, for instance, but also problems that pop up around the globe that he believes in working together on the international front to solve problems. That will be just a very different way of operating. Deal making with Congress. I think that that's going to be required of the next president because we have divided government, just as we do here in Minnesota. But I think that's also his instinct to figure out how we get to yes with people with very, very different views of the world. And so I think that will be more of a normal process of how large pieces of legislation are negotiated and completed. And again, I think that he's going to do his best to try to lower the partisan divide that we have on pretty much every subject, and try to figure out the places where he can appeal to the broad swath of Americans around coming together around things. Dealing with COVID is sort of the first step in that regard. And as I said earlier, like working with people you don't agree with, working with people across the aisle, working with leaders of states that did not vote for Joe Biden. All that I think you'll see. And I think, in fact, I think you'll see the president-elect maybe bend over backward in that regard to demonstrate kind of a very different way of operating that and all being done in a way to try to lower that partisan divide some. So I'm hopeful in that regard.
You mentioned this notion of restocking the federal government. Obviously, there's been a lot of positions left open in the Trump administration in agencies. Are there specific agencies or issues that you think President-elect Biden is going to focus on to kind of restock those federal agencies?
Well, no question, the State Department is an area that requires rebuilding. There's been a net flow out of the Foreign Service and out of the State Department. There is a lot of open seats from the ambassador level on down. I think there's a real eagerness to sort of rebuild the State Department so that we can, lead again on the international front. Every agency really has lost a set of career government workers. That maybe that's a good thing. I think that we'll see turnover, but we'll see some fresh energy come in. But we'll see those positions filled again at the EPA, for instance. In areas of the Justice Department, there's been quite a few people who have left that agency. And also in the agencies that are combating COVID, the CDC, for instance, and some of the other agencies that deal with public health and science, I think have really faced some tough times in the last year, especially. And so I think he's moving already very quickly to identify people who can move right into those jobs. On January 20th, a lot of those jobs do not depend on approval of the Senate. And so I think there's a big focus right now on the personnel below the cabinet level, in addition to his key cabinet picks that he still has to make.
Awesome. Let's talk about the Senate a little bit. You mentioned it's likely that it's going to remain in Republican control, so a split Congress in DC. Talk about what do you think maybe his advantages, and perhaps this was an advantage for why he was picked to be vice president under President Obama, but we haven't had a president in a long time who's been in the Senate for a long time. President Obama was in the Senate, but not for very long. I think that gives him an advantage when we talk about dealing with a tight majority in the Senate, trying to get things done.
I think it does. I mean, I think relationships still matter, maybe less so in this more partisan era that we're in. I think the legislators on this Zoom call would agree with that relationships do count. So that's important. I think if you listen to Joe Biden when he campaigned, he actually hung on to that quaint notion that he is interested in working with Republicans. He took some grief for that, but he's serious about it. And I think he actually likes the idea of getting into a room with people who have different views and trying to carve out solutions. I think the deal making will depend on a set of senators who may have inordinate power. Amy Klobuchar is actually part of that group. A set of senators on the Democratic side who are more in the more moderate camp and who are more legislating oriented. Amy's like that. So is Tina Smith, for instance. So I think actually our two senators could play a large role in helping to craft bipartisan legislation. There's going to have to be a set of Republican senators who also agree to that. But of course, every 2 years, there's a set of senators who are up for re-election. And so there are people who aren't interested in the partisan fights, are interested in getting things done, have to run on their record of accomplishment in 2 years, and I think will be incentivized to do some deals. There's a senator from Delaware, Joe Biden's home state, Chris Coons. They're calling him the ambassador to the GOP because he is someone with great relationships across partisan divides. He's very close to Joe Biden. Watch him being a really important actor in all of that. Someone who can keep the incoming president well informed of negotiations and actually speak for him in some ways in the Senate. That's really important because in some administrations, you never know. And you don't know what the president's, how they're going to react until you produce something and put it in front of them or send up a trial balloon and see whether they embrace it or shoot it down. I think with the way Joe Biden works, that will be a much more smooth process. I think for that reason, this whole Senate question is why it's unlikely that we'll see any US senators in Joe Biden's cabinet. I know Amy's being talked about for that, but I think in the end, he's not going to pluck people out of the Senate because he needs everyone there. He needs senators with experience. He needs senators who are loyal to him and willing to kind of help him stay there. And Amy is near that top of the list. I mean, she has become very close to Joe Biden. She definitely has the ear of him and some of his top aides. She obviously was very helpful to him, especially in the primary, by dropping out and endorsing him. He then won Minnesota. If you remember, he was in 5th place in Minnesota a week before our primary. Amy dropped out, endorsed him. He won Minnesota. He will not forget that. So she will be, I think, watch her being very key in some of these negotiations.
And kind of what shape do I think it's possible we're not going to see a COVID relief bill pass during lame duck session. It's kind of one day it looks likely, one day it looks unlikely. Right now it's chaotic. But what do you think that process will look like if we assume we don't get a COVID relief bill during the lame duck Congress?
Gosh, I hope you're wrong, John Paul, because man, is it needed right now, and it's way late. And so I really hope they get things done now. And I think there will be a pretty big backlash if something doesn't get done. I'm not sure who faces the brunt of that, but it's a huge problem if they don't, because there's two problems. We have relief, immediate relief, and the states can do some things. I know the state of Minnesota is talking about using some of its resources, but we need some federal dollars immediately. And that's all just to help people deal with the economic pain of some of the shutdowns that have happened. The second round has to be major stimulus. We talked for years about an infrastructure bill coming out of Washington. Well, that never happened, but that still is a huge priority. And once the vaccine takes hold, we have to get the country back to work. And Joe Biden's message around building the economy back and better is I think what will take center stage for him. And so he will be looking for major resources to that help that provide the investments that we need, that help stimulate the economy, that actually do put people back to work, and also and hopefully in a way that also steers things in some of the directions that he'd like to see, especially say on climate change. I don't think we're going to see major climate legislation, but we could see stimulus bills that help set up a new smart electrical grid that help continue to incentivize the movement towards electrifying the economy and then creating the sustainable generation of that electricity. That's happening now. The markets are helping that movement happen, and there's things we can do to actually move that along quicker, put people to work, create jobs. So that's what he'd like to see. If there is no relief bill, then we have to start there again, and it will make it harder then to do that second piece of work, which is that larger stimulus package. And I'm of the belief, and the Congress earlier this year, if you remember, did a $3+ trillion relief bill. I'm actually of the belief that we do need now more action of that size, New Deal size stimulus legislation that comes out of Washington that does a whole lot of things, including help state and local governments deal with the fiscal problems they have and the challenges they're seeing on the ground right now. That's just one piece, right? And then there's all this infrastructure stuff we talked about, and handling unemployment, helping businesses that have been particularly affected by COVID-19. So there's a long list of stuff. We need the money to do that from the federal government. And my hope is that we do this relief so that we can do economic stimulus. And it will just it will slow things down. It will be a bigger bottleneck, and not getting relief now will be, I think, really, really disappointing and problematic for states and local governments and for the people who are suffering right now.
Yeah. I want to remind everyone, if you have questions, feel free to drop them into the chat bar, and we can get to them as we go. Let's talk about Minnesota Connections. No political event here would be complete if we didn't make Minnesota Connections. You talked about Senator Klobuchar already, but they're already shaping up to be some significant Minnesota connections in the president's cabinet. Why don't you talk about a few of those?
Yeah, well, there's three names right now have already been mentioned. Of course, Jake Sullivan, as National Security Advisor. That was no surprise. If anyone's had the pleasure of meeting Jake Sullivan, he's one of the smartest creative thinkers I've ever met. He's also super humble and just a nice person. Dennis McDonough, who was in the previous Obama administration as chief of staff, was announced yesterday as the Secretary of Veterans, the Veterans Administration Secretary. And then Michael Osterholm, who is going to be one of the key advisors on COVID and on COVID response for the president. Those are all big deals. Having that kind of those sort of perches for our state in the federal government is great and exciting. You know, in addition, remember Joe Biden came here. He campaigned hard here. He won here. He has a great relationship with Governor Walz, and so I think all that is to our benefit, and will allow us to allow the governor, allow our congressional delegation to pick up the phone and have informed inside information conversations, and Amy Klobuchar, I think, will be sort of kind of near the front of that line when it comes to legislating in the Senate. She'll have great access to the president and his people, and sometimes directly and sometimes through Minnesotans who are populating the federal government.
There's been some analysis, the notion the first wave of cabinet picks we've seen are a lot of times people that served in the Obama administration, and there's been this notion of Biden's administration looking like a third Obama term. Do you have any thoughts on that? Even if is that a good thing or is that a bad thing?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that's a little bit of a sort of an easy analysis. Yes, there's definitely people who are coming back who were in the Obama administration, not necessarily in the jobs that they're in now, though. And so I think the cabinet picks, for the most part, he's done. He's hit all the right notes for the most part on the cabinet picks. And there's several other key ones that remain out there, including the Justice Department, Attorney General. But I think the cabinet picks reflect several things right now. I mean, first, they are experienced people who can hit the ground running on day one. And also, for the most part, I think will not have a lot of difficulty getting through the Senate. And that's a good thing. You don't want long delays in putting people in these key positions. You also want people who know the subject matter, who have worked with others across the administration already, so there can be good collaboration from day one, and who know their agency. That's a good thing, I think, right now. So he's really leaning into experienced hands, and that's probably why you see people talking about the third Obama administration. But the other things that they, for the most part, these are people who are really aligned with Biden's views on the economy, on foreign policy, et cetera. So these are people that he's very comfortable with. And that's also super key, I think, for him. And the third thing is that for the most part, these are professionals who in their field who aren't really looking to run for president, or maybe trying to leverage this move for something greater. The politicians who are being appointed the few politicians, people like John Kerry, for instance, I mean, they're and kind of in the twilight of their political careers, and I think are looking to accomplish things directly and not set themselves up for some run for office. And I think that's good too. So you have people with no other agenda other than to just try to work hard and be successful and do the right thing and help this president succeed. So I think these are good picks, and they're experienced. And I would take that over kind of a whole, a whole set of unknown people or folks who are really stepping into jobs that require a big learning curve for them. I don't think we can afford that right now.
Any thoughts on what you think the relationship will be like between President Biden and Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader? They're both spent a lot of time in the Senate, and we saw with the Supreme Court nomination of Amy Coney Barrett, obviously the Senate, and you highlighted this, really tight balance of power, highly partisan right now. What do you think that's going to manifest? How do you think that dynamic will manifest itself with how McConnell perhaps handles Biden's nominations and the confirmation of the cabinet picks?
I think Mitch McConnell will pick his battles, and that may be a different approach than he had when President Obama was in office. Mitch McConnell, you have to understand, what are his objectives and what does he want to do? And he is about, and he's been very successful in, holding GOP power in the Senate, and particularly populating the judiciary with their picks. That's primarily what he's about. Part of that, though, means that he's got to give some of his members of the Republican majority the latitude to, work across the aisle to get things done so that they can run on a record. And so he knows that, and I think he will respond accordingly on some things. Other things he will fight. My guess is that on some of these cabinet picks, those aren't really, I'm not sure those are really battles that you want to fall on your sword on necessarily. There may be one that they want to use as an example for politics. I don't know, but there used to be one of the norms, and I think this president is hoping to get back to that. Is that president for the most part got to pick his cabinet, and the Senate could weigh in, but it wasn't a battle royale over every person. And that, you can blame, both sides for how partisan the cabinet secretary process has become in the Senate. And I'm not, blaming one side. I'm not blaming just Republicans. I think that the Democrats have done that too. So the hope is that, especially in this time in our country with the COVID vaccine, with COVID-19 raging, with a lot of work to be done, with a lot of economic pain, having big fights over cabinet secretaries is probably not something that people want to see in this country. And my guess is that McConnell understands that. So they have a good relationship. Doesn't mean that that Mitch McConnell is going to, change the way he is and how he operates. But I do think that having that relationship allows them to have conversations, to maybe pick and choose their battles together, to acknowledge the other side's interests. And if you can do that, then there's the makings of compromise on some big items. And so we'll see how that goes. But he's got some pressures as well. And I think he's going to have to be responsive and to his members and to some external pressures for the Senate to act on big items, some big items.
Yeah, so we have a question from David Cousins, and actually I was going to ask you this exact same question. He says, please reflect on the dynamics of the further left pressures on a moderate Biden. And I was curious in that from the lens of you have a smaller Democrat majority returning in the House. And part of that majority is this younger, more progressive leaning wing, the squad, members like Congresswoman Omar. How do you think that Biden manages that? Do you think it makes it challenging for him to get stuff done?
Well, I think every president faces factions within their party and the need to respond. I do think that, and I talked earlier about administrative versus policy actions. I do think there's a number of things he can do on the executive order and administrative front that that are on the topics that he ran on. Climate change, for instance, I think you'll see him rejoin the Paris Agreement on day one. On immigration, watch him reverse the order around Dreamers and allowing those children of people who came here illegally to stay in this country. And other things like rejoining the World Health Organization, things like that. I think so. There's going to be some executive orders that I think will immediately sort of respond to some of the things that he actually ran on that are part of the agenda that are supported by both moderates and progressives within the party. I think on the policy front, it's just pretty obvious. There's going to be serious limits on what can be passed and what can be done. And that's just a reality. So there will be pressures, but I think the reality will just be another situation, will just kind of allow him some room to move. I think he'll be cut some slack because he's got a very different Senate than what I think a lot of people hope there would be with this incoming administration. I think Kamala Harris probably plays an important role in being a sort of an ambassador to the progressive wing of the party, being someone who continues to sort of frame those issues for the administration, keep them front and center. I think she actually being someone who comes out of the Senate, I think has an ability to work with members of Congress and to allow them to be heard and be responsive to them, but also push back when need be because the votes just aren't there in the Senate. Healthcare is another example where unsure what can be done on that. We're waiting for the Supreme Court to rule whether the Affordable Care Act will be completely overturned or whether they'll do severability and keep the essential components of it. But healthcare was an issue that he ran on, not around Medicare for all, but around providing more options for people with the ACA. That is unlikely to be a policy success with the Senate the way it is. So there's things you can do administratively, and he may, and I think he'll work on that. And I think they'll get creative on the administrative front. There'll be a lot of smart people there. Moderation on the policy front, but maybe a lot of opportunities with the direct action that he can do as a president.
Yeah, you kind of answered this question, led right into it. But Kamala Harris, obviously, her becoming vice president is historic in its own right, and you mentioned some of the ways she might carve out a unique role for herself as vice president. But what other thoughts do you have on what we'll see from her as vice president?
Well, I think that I think Biden will be, will probably stay focused on the work at hand in Washington. I think Kamala Harris is someone who actually can travel the country and use the vice presidential bully pulpit to build support for things that Joe Biden wants to do and actually be on the ground in places in states and help states and the federal government work together, especially on things like the vaccine. So she can be a troubleshooter for the administration, having someone at that level who can actually work across agencies, which more and more needs to happen because, the federal government is a very siloed place. But when you get to a state or a locality, I mean, it is all about collaboration across a lot of fronts, right? And interlinked issues. She can help. She can help the federal government respond accordingly and pull resources from many different places to actually help solve problems. So look for her to do that. Look for her to be a kind of an ambassador at large to this president in the country at the state level, both communicating the agenda and also maybe problem solving.
Yeah. This is another question that came in from an attendee. Murray asks, I'm going to paraphrase this a little bit. It's asking about energy. And do you think that we'll see Biden push for an all-electric economy? If so, do you think that he will include nuclear as part of that?
To be honest, I do not know what he said recently around nuclear energy and nuclear power, but I do know that he subscribes to the idea that we have to do a wholesale conversion of our economy over time to a mostly all electric a source of energy, and then figure out how to sustainably produce that energy. I was reading this morning in the paper about the large wind farms that are now being proposed for southern Minnesota, and that's to replace the major coal-fired plant in North Dakota that's going offline in 2023. That's all happening without any government involvement. That's all market. So the market's already moving that direction. But there's infrastructure questions, there's regulatory questions, there's incentives and things like that that the federal government can do to just really turbocharge that whole transition that's happening. Watch him do that. Watch him try to do that under stimulus. If it takes resources, it's going to have to go through Congress. So unsure of how that plays. But there's lots that you can do administratively. So absolutely, I think that he will do what he can to respond to the climate crisis without necessarily some kind of major piece of legislation that comes out of Congress. But rejoining the Paris Agreement so that there's some goals that are set and setting out benchmarks for transition. And again, I apologize. I have no idea what his view on nuclear energy is. I know that there's unlikely to be new nuclear power plants built, but we're talking about the existing infrastructure, and I just don't know. But my guess is that that's not a priority for him to be taking those offline at a time when we are trying to convert to an all-electric economy.
Feel free to ask any more questions you have. I've got one more here, and then we'll take any more that come in, and then I think we'll move on with the morning. But I wanted to ask you about immigration, because that was obviously a huge part of President Trump's 2016 campaign, and I would argue the first few years of his administration. And then he didn't run on it very much, I think, in 2020. But what do you think that incoming President-elect Biden is going to do on that issue?
Yeah, it is surprising. It wasn't an issue at all in this last election, even though it's been a major point of conversation and contention over the last decade, at least. Well, it's a hard issue. It's one that requires ultimately a legislative solution, a reform of our immigration laws. I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon. But again, if you looked at the current administration, there's a sort of a lot you can do from the bully pulpit as well as administratively. Watch him change the approach to Dreamers is one big thing that will happen, I think, right away, and restore protections for those Dreamers so they can stay here. I think there's going to be probably a complete evaluation of where we stand on immigration right now, what this previous administration was doing, what their priorities are, and a retooling of those priorities. I'm not sure the border wall / fence is going to be part of that. Is going to be one of those priorities. I think there will be more interest in trying to deal with some of the immigration challenges at their source in Central America, where you've got, some major economic dislocation happening because of climate change, because of, governments that aren't responsive to their people. And so, Biden is someone who believes that the U.S. has a role to play in the world, that what happens in the world affects us at home, and watch him try to engage more directly in Central America in particular, and in the problems there, and figuring out if there's ways that we can keep people at home and not have them try to, move to the border. Also, I think that you'll find that there's a philosophical difference around immigration, that, that Joe Biden believes that legal immigration is a component of the economic engine of this country. And so I do believe you'll have a generally, positive stance on us being a country that welcomes people legally in. And then, absorbs them into our country economically and culturally. So I think those are all sort of differences. Watch them though, to kind of do an evaluation of that right now, and maybe, in a couple months' time, come out with a more comprehensive sort of overall policy on immigration that both maybe has a legislative component and has an administrative action component.
Two audience questions for you. First is from Cheryl Polton. Please touch on how you see our relationship with China, or see how you see our relationship will change, and how will we guard against China increasing economic and world dominance that may ultimately harm the United States' global position.
Yeah, this is why we needed the former senator on the phone, because these questions are getting a little way above my pay grade. But with China, maybe Donald Trump did Joe Biden a favor by really, setting up a pretty adversarial relationship between those two countries, between us and China. I think Biden believes in international trade, and believes that generally that's a positive for our economy. But I think they also believe that China is a major threat on a number of fronts, on intellectual property, on domestic interference in our economy and even in our elections, and that they have designs on building their world power. I think Biden comes in very clear-eyed about that, and will probably continue the process of trying to keep China in check on those fronts. I think they'll take a look at those international agreements and try to figure out where you go from there. I don't understand. I'm not really a trade person, so I don't actually know kind of what would be different on the trade front. But I don't think you're going to see, there's a lot of rhetoric in the campaign about being weak on China, et cetera. I don't think that's going to happen. I think Biden is, as clear-eyed as anyone about the threat that China poses to our position in the world, and also some of the, some of their transgressive activities around us and our economy, and stealing intellectual property and things like that. I think there will be more of a reliance on the intelligence agencies, that the intelligence agencies will be tasked to really look at cyber crimes, as well as disinformation and other kinds of things on that front, and that will be taken seriously, and we'll take, and those agencies will be tasked to do something about it. And I'm not sure that was the case on this in this current administration. So I think that's actually an area where we'll see more activity. We'll see a more robust kind of foreign intelligence and foreign policy component around cybersecurity, cyber crimes, and disinformation.
Last question we have from an attendee is, no one seems to be talking about the federal deficit and Social Security changes to make it viable into the future. Do you think Joe Biden has any appetite to tackle this issue? And is anyone talking about it?
Well, there wasn't a lot of talk about it in the last 4 years. The debt and deficit went way up. That was before that, huge COVID response bill. Watch it become a topic of conversation from Republican senators who are going to want to find ways to distinguish themselves from the Biden administration, also maybe this current administration. So I think that it will be discussed again. I think there was a conclusion early on this year when they passed that $3 trillion plus relief package, that right now the debt and deficit matter less than the immediate response, economic relief and stimulus for our economy, that we're at a time in our country where we just simply need to spend the dollars to get back to a place that we were at pre-COVID. There will be talk about the debt and deficit. I think that pressures coming from the Republican Party will probably keep the price tags down on some of these bills. We're seeing that now with the relief package. That will just be a reality. And that's where I think really good negotiating skills, compromise, relationships between the players will help arrive to an endpoint because ultimately you need to get to that endpoint, and not let the perfect get in the way of the good. I think that's Joe Biden's view of things, and that hopefully what we won't see is gridlock, where the two sides just cannot come together for whatever reasons. And so I think you'll see less gridlock, and that will mean spending dollars, but probably fewer dollars than if the Democrats had taken the Senate over, and where they didn't have that kind of pressure from the other side.
Thank you. Thanks for the questions. Thanks for your answers. This has been fantastic. I wanted to give you an opportunity, Jeff. Any last words or bold predictions you want to leave us with?
No real bold predictions. I'm just I'm hopeful that I for one am interested in a return to normalcy. I don't want to have to sort of think about our president every day in whatever way he presents himself that we sort of did in the last 4 years. So I'm looking for that return to normalcy, and also to norms, operating norms of our federal government. I mean, there's just a lot that depends on the characters and the intentions of our leaders, as we saw. And so I'm just hopeful that we're going to have kind of a return to that, which I think will be good for all of us, and it will be good for our country. And once we're out of COVID-19, could lead to some big things happening in this country again.
Thank you, Jeff. Thanks so much for being with us this morning. We really appreciate it. I'm going to share my screen back here again. Hopefully we do a little better than the first time. As we mentioned, in January, we're going to talk with our new legislators, preview the 2021 legislative session here in Minnesota. So we look forward to hearing from our legislators, as well as meeting our new legislators. You can also see the topics for Issues and Insights series next year. Sponsorship is open for that. And to the sponsors that have already agreed to sponsor next year, we're extremely appreciative of that. And we hope that at some point next year, we're going to see the return of this in person, which will be great. We were joking with the sponsor the other day that the lukewarm bacon will never taste so good as when we get back together. So again, I want to thank our legislators for being with us this morning, as well as our mayors. We really appreciate your engagement. Thank our sponsors again, and thank you to Jeff. I feel like we could have do the same event in another month, and we'll have just as many things to talk about with the incoming administration. So thank you to everyone for being with us this morning, and we hope you have a great rest of your day.